if you're watching, welcome to this Teaching Tech podcast. With me is, on my right, Bill DiMartino. And then we have Chris Williams and Mike McDowell joining us. Um, so this time we're going to do a little bit of pre-question. Who are you? And what made you want to teach others? We're going to have a teaching focus here. All of us are teachers. So teach some form of technology, whether it be Tableau, Alteryx, or something else. So at first, I'm going to introduce myself because I'm first on camera. My name is Dawn Harrington. I've been teaching technology for over 10 years. I started with Microsoft Office. Then I went to Tableau and Alteryx. So that's my background. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Bill. You're next. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hey everybody, nice to meet you. Bill DiMartino. So I have actually been teaching probably more than 7 years, and I started off with Excel. And Dawn kind of nudged me into teaching Alteryx as well as Tableau. So I always appreciate the encouragement and found out that I was really good with it and I kind of nudged McDowell into joining us as well to teach classes with me. So that's been a big journey of mine for the past 3 years, teaching people, and I really love being able to give back to the community and help upskilling a bunch of people in new skills. And it also helps with like presentation and being able to talk just general in meetings and overall communication skills as well. So with that, I guess
Thanks,
I'll pass
Bill.
it.
I'm going to pass it on to Chris Williams. Go ahead. Introduce yourself if you don't mind.
Sure. Hey, everybody. My name is Chris Williams. It's great to be here. As far as teaching, I've been teaching Tableau and Alteryx for probably the better part of 5.5, 6 years now. From a corporate environment, as well as also in the classroom environment, as well as an education as college environment as well at the local universities around here, ranging from Cal State Fullerton to UC Irvine, where I've taught Alteryx and Tableau there. One of the things that makes me so happy to teach is I could be having a completely, draining day, but when I get in front of the students, no matter what their age levels, and see their excitement and have at least me be able to reach one person and see that look of I got it, or that satisfaction, I could be dead to rights that day, zero energy whatsoever. And then by the end of that class, I feel better because I've been able to communicate properly to those individuals, and that makes me feel good. And I also learn about myself. So it's really satisfying to be able to get to share knowledge and also learn how to teach others. So I do that every time. So yeah, and I can hand it back to you, Dawn, so you can pass the mic.
I also forgot to, Bill, I don't know if you mentioned it too, but what made you want to teach others? And we'll introduce you, Mike, in a second too. So answer that question. I'm so organized here.
Yeah, no.
Go ahead, Bill. What made you want to teach us?
I just, enjoy, first out of necessity, because I needed to teach people how to use technical tools in my job. But then after a while, it became something that inherently I wanted to do to kind of help upskill everybody. So it became like kind of a networking thing and a branding thing. It was like, hey, I can teach you a little bit about Excel to help out, your career going forward. So, and then that just became part of my brand to help people teach.
All right, Mike, now over to you. Who you are and what made you want to teach others?
Yeah, so I've been working with Bill for a long time, and we actually did start teaching together, like you mentioned. It's been about 7 years ago that we first started. I was definitely a reluctant teacher. Dawn first tried getting me into teaching, much like Bill. I told her I wasn't really interested in taking a role that was going to be primarily focused on teaching. So as time went on, Bill eventually, I think Dawn got to him more, so she prodded him into teaching, and then he was like, hey, would you like to be involved? And I was like, okay, you know what, I'll give it a try, and just totally wound up falling in love with it. And to Chris's point, really what made it kind of addictive is just seeing when people get it and seeing what they develop after you teach them and the things they produce and even the impact it can have on their careers. It just really became addictive and enjoyable. It was just a whole new aspect of my job that I hadn't even considered before and totally fell in love with it.
Same for me. Like when I started teaching, people would ask questions that you don't normally think about, and you're like, I haven't thought of it like that. So it was kind of like a learning process too. You learn lots of, and we'll talk about this in a bit, soft skills and like how to teach others. Because right off the bat, you're not going to be a great teacher. So there's methods to kind of help you. I also kind of selfishly wanted to start training because I was so nervous in front of people, speaking in front of people, like my voice would shake. You can't tell that now, but when I first started, that was my goal. Is like, how do I get to be a better public speaker? And training is the solution because your mind is kind of occupied and you're not so nervous because you're thinking about others. You're not thinking about like, did I say that correctly? Did I stumble? Did I mumble? So that's kind of, where I came from too. So the first question I'm going to ask is, how do you handle left field questions? So if you're teaching others and someone comes out with a question that's just, doesn't have to do with anything that you're teaching at that moment, how do you handle that as a trainer? And I'm going to go back to Mike for this question. You're going to be first. Go ahead.
Yeah, this was a real challenge, especially beginning teaching, learning how to manage a large class. So when the classes moved almost entirely to Zoom, we had classes with like 300 people on them. And you know how it is when you're first teaching people technology, they're nervous, they're worried they're not going to get it. So you'll get a lot of people almost like panic asking questions like, oh, this thing isn't coming up that you said should come up, and like those sorts of things. So Bill and I went through a number of tries as far as what works so we can manage these questions where we can get things answered for people while also not keeping the rest of the class kind of hostage while we focus on one person. And what we came up with was this spiel that we give before class every time we teach now, which is called me questions versus we questions. And what we tell people is, if you have a me question, which is a question like, hey, this random thing popped up on my window and I can't get rid of it, or my registration isn't working, or just something that's only impacting them and is of zero benefit to the other 299 people in the room. Essentially, what we tell them is, one, try to figure it out yourself. Two, if there's another trainer in the room, reach out to them on the side rather than stopping the whole class and getting us all to wait while you get your question answered. And three, we have other options as well, like the material we go over in class. We try to send out a summary afterwards. We have office hours that you can attend. You can always reach out to us after class. Please try those other options as opposed to we questions, which we want to hear. Those are things that we're going over in class, concepts that people may not be getting. And those are the types of questions that if one person has it, a lot of other people might have that exact same question. So we want to have that interaction in class. We want to make sure people are able to follow along and get the material and those sorts of things. And the impact of having that speech with the students was really twofold. One, they actually started advocating for if people were stopping the class with those me questions. Like they were like, hey, do you think you could take that offline with them later? Like it made them feel empowered to speak up for themselves if they weren't listening to us when we were giving them that feedback. And it also lessened those me questions in general because people kind of felt the pressure of those other 299 eyes in the room on them if they could feel they were dragging the class along, where sometimes people just aren't self-aware enough to get that. So that was a real game changer for us and a real learning opportunity for Bill and I when we first started teaching.
Bill, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, and I would say one of the key things is like, and Mike mentioned it, but let those people that are kind of panic asking questions know that there's a venue, there's an out there. We're going to be here for you. We're not going to leave you behind. We're going to be here to help you, even if it's not during this class. At some point, we're here to help you. So,
Chris, you have anything to add?
Yeah, what I try to do is I try to acknowledge them without taking away from the rest of the class. So The worst thing you could do is dismiss somebody's question, as random as it may be. It's not random to them, because you want to make sure that you're inclusive and promote that activity without disrupting the class. So it's not an exact science. You kind of have to play. You can set the table when you start your class, but you also have to play it out based on the personality and the temperament of that particular audience. So it's a constant observation as a teacher to really understand what it is that you're dealing with in that particular class, to give you that desired outcome, to encourage that incorporation some more. So.
And that kind of ties into our next question is how do you approach teaching students with different skill levels? Because this is always something that's, a little complex with teaching technology. Is you may have someone that is very intimidated by technology, as Mike had mentioned earlier, or you have people that might be bored, that they kind of caught on very quickly and they're waiting for everybody else to catch up. So what advice would you give, to other teachers about teaching students of different levels? Chris, I'm going to start with you this time.
Sure. What I try to do is always rely on the concepts. Tool means nothing if you don't know why you're using it. So everybody, the common denominator really is understanding why am I using Tableau? What is the point of me using Tableau? I need to be able to build a dashboard. So you build off of the concept of the dashboard. What is a dashboard? What does that mean for you? So if you can understand the concepts of what's actually happening first, then the tools itself become a tool in the sense that you don't have to necessarily be as intimidated. You just know why you're using it. You're just not being robotic and saying, oh, I was told to use Tableau, so I'm going to do this for this. Because then it puts an added emphasis, pressure on making sure that you have something definitive coming out of that class. Oh, I have to know this because I have a dashboard due in a month. But if you don't know why you're using the tool in the first place, that learning curve is going to be much harder. So I try to start off there. Everybody, you may have different levels, and you want to make sure you don't leave anybody behind. So again, it's almost like reading the room, what people have actually said and what actually they are, trying to see if that's a true reality. And then I speak to that first, and then I start with general concepts and trying to read the room and see how many people are following, how many aren't, and making sure that they're accommodated without leaving people bored. Like I said, it's like it's a real science that you want to bottle and put it on the shelf and sell it, but the formula changes every class you do. And even with the same class, it can change from day to day. So it requires a lot of self-awareness as a teacher to understand what your class you're doing that day.
Bill, what do you think?
So I like to approach everything from a level of humility, being that I did not start off with a degree or all this other stuff that knew all this stuff from education or anything. So I tried to take it, even when I was going for my degree, I tried to take every exercise and lay it out in layman's terms, so that way I understood it, and that helped me understand the topic, even if it's something as advanced as how a computer works on the back end and the multi-threading and all this very complex topics. I try to break it down in key parts and very basic understanding, so that I will explain it to myself, and in explaining it to myself, hopefully everybody will get a good understanding of it. But then on the other side, if you have people that are more advanced, like Chris was talking to, you kind of have to change your way you teach to them, because they're not going to learn at the basic level. They're going to learn at a more advanced level, and they're going to be like, I'm bored with what you're saying. Please pick it up. But I like to lay that out as a base level in a layman's term that's simple for anybody that knows nothing about technology to kind of pick up from the ground. Let's go to the basic logic of 1 + 1 = 2, and then we'll start from there, and then we'll build up on that understanding. So, and then remember that everybody is at a different level. You started off at not knowing anything about it, remembering where you started off at, so you can teach from an area of understanding and standing instead of like, I just want to get this content out to you so you learn it, because they're not going to learn that way. And again, making it fun and making it interesting. I always like to say, when I'm in class, if I was listening to myself right now, would I be boring myself, or am I actually entertaining myself? And am I having fun? Is my energy, not there? Because you can't learn unless you're having fun. And I know when all of us were on a team together, we had a lot of fun, and I learned a lot. So that was a lesson for me that, hey, fun equals learning. So the more fun you have with the group, the more connection you have, the more bonding you have with a teacher, the more you learn from that process. Inherently, it just happens because you remember some of the things somebody said. It could be weeks down the line when you're finally picking up. I know I went through these classes like 1 or 2 times, and I bring this up to the class, and I had no idea what Dawn was talking about when she went over all these tools. But I remembered the 3rd time I went through it. I remembered when I started teaching it, and that came back to me. So it's those connections, it's making it fun and making it interesting, and then remembering back to those moments as well.
I agree about humility, to the point where I will actually tell my students, hey, don't make the mistake that I made when I first started, to kind of put your self as personable. You're not up there like, I know everything, like you're like, I made mistakes too, learn from my mistakes. So, I just think that philosophy is a little bit better to have as a teacher. Mike, go ahead.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I try to do that as well. And usually I tell them most of the knowledge I acquired, I learned by screwing up. Like I didn't take as many courses when I was first learning. So I'm like, believe me, whatever mistake you're making, like whatever you're doing, and you're like, oh my God, how did I do that? I can guarantee you I probably did it worse, and I probably did it more times than you've done it. So just be kind with yourself and be patient with yourself. And then specifically with newer users versus more advanced users, I always try to start like either a session, or if it's just like an office hours where people are throwing random questions, so you get a mix of questions that way. I always try to level set at the very beginning. Like if it's a more advanced question, I kind of almost try to advocate for our less advanced users and say, I just want to if you're newer to Alteryx or Tableau, this question's going to be a little bit advanced for you. Don't feel stressed out if you're not getting it. We're going to answer this question, but just kind of listen to what we're saying and think about this for the future, how you might be able to utilize this concept we're going over. And then, try to remember some of the key points, but you're probably not going to get it based on this. So just kind of use it as a way to gather some information and think about things you might do in the future. And then for the more advanced users, I usually just let them know before we go into something like this class, and the content was designed for more basic users. We appreciate you being here today. We're going to try to show you some best practices that you might not be aware of, maybe some tips and tricks that you can also learn from. But in general, the content is geared towards newer users. So I feel when you set that stage, it puts people at ease again. I find that a lot of teaching is just like calming people's fears because everybody feels anxious in some way. So if you can kind of set the stage on the front end, it helps a lot with addressing that.
And kind of to piggyback off of that, like I always give this speech when people are feeling overwhelmed. Like, hey, I give this story about how I felt overwhelmed in the first 2 classes. I was like, stick with it. You might not understand it now, but you will get it. It will come to you. You'll learn it at some point. Just stick with it. And it's that perseverance that's going to get you through. And it's that perseverance that's going to help you learn. So
Yeah, one more thing to add. I try to liken it to anything that you have that's real time, like something that's not necessarily technical. I try to relate it to something that everybody has done in some capacity. So this is something that's really helpful in sort of reinforcing everything with them. So it's like, oh, okay, this is something that I know about, and this is something that I can relate it to. It sinks in. All you're looking for is that one click. Once you get that click, everything is great.
Are there any specific tools or platforms that you consider indispensable for your classes? Any tools or technologies? Mike.
I don't have any specifically that I lean on heavily. I definitely say Snagit is a big one for me. Being able to take screenshots, record some short clips of like I clicked here, I went here, like those sorts of things. I've talked to some people who are just using the snipping tool that's native to Windows, and they're like, no, it works fine. I was like, yeah, it works fine, but this one works way better. You can do a lot more with it. So I definitely think Snagit's a big resource. And then if you are going off of like PowerPoint slides and those kinds of things, just using things like the laser pointer and the highlighter on slides to like call out key points and those kinds of things are really helpful as well to kind of help people follow along as you're going through it.
Chris, do you have any tools that you use?
Snagit's great. I mean,
It is great.
it's one of my favorite tools, especially when I'm putting together training, because it makes that so much seamless. I don't really have any tools that I rely on because you sometimes don't know what's going to be available to you. So I prepare with obviously Alteryx and Tableau. If I'm teaching them, obviously that's a given. But sometimes you may not have the choice on what's available, or if, God forbid, something is available, then it's not. Then that becomes a problem. So I just try to make sure that obviously all of the general specs. Please have your licenses ready for Alteryx or your free licenses installed with Tableau. Do you have your sample data or what have you in making sure all that's settled? But Snagit is probably something that I swear by, just because you never know when you're going to need the screen cap of someone having a question. And I want to capture it because that teaches me something about a class that I may need for the next class. So hopefully that answered that question. It wasn't really a technology. My apologies.
Bill, do you have anything to add?
I remember Chris was also talking about Miro in a previous session, so I think that was useful what he brought up. Yeah, and I know when I watched the session, there was something called mouse pause where it would like actually track your mouse clicks. Unfortunately, I can't get it into the sessions that I teach, but I think it's like a Mac thing that they have out there. I'm not sure, but it's like an add-on where it just tracks your mouse and it shows where you click and everything like that. That was amazing, and you can't believe how important it is to have that laser pointer on your PowerPoint, because one time I didn't use it when McDowell was using it. They're like, McDowell's doing this. What's wrong with you? You're not doing this. I can't see where you're pointing. So that is a great tip for that. And another thing is just checking out that mouse pointer. But the primary thing I would say is technology-wise, work with your resolution, because if you have a large monitor and you're sharing with a class, they're not going to be able to see the small print and everything. So just make sure you change your resolution. So work on the technical side with what you have and make sure you're adjusting your resolution to be smaller so that people can see what you're showcasing.
And I'm actually going to take a question out of previous order because Chris made a very good point of, it depends on what kind of resources are available. So how do you address challenges such as lack of resources or digital access with students, in your class? Bill, I'll start with you.
So you try to go through with them how to self-solve. And again, if it's a me versus a we question, you try to do it off to the side. But sometimes you have to say, okay, we've given you plenty of opportunities to kind of follow, because we have emails beforehand, we have sessions before just to get people ready. But there's at some point where you have to be like, okay, you need to take the time to sit down. If you're not taking the time to sit down and do this, I can't solve that for you because you haven't done it before and you had all the other chances. So give the students those chances to do that, and then give them the resources, whether it be help guides or FAQs, or like McDowell was pointing out with the Snagit tool, you can take videos. You can show the video of how you do all these steps. You can do a slide of how you go through all these steps with whatever process you have. But then sometimes people, unfortunately, just don't follow through with that. But you just have to direct them back to the sources. Like, I'm not going to stop the class just to go through all these sources, but here's that link. here's where you can find all this. Please take the time to go through that. And there's sometimes there's going to be issues where nothing's available. Everything they do is not going to be available. So you have to, give them the resources to reach out to fix their issues, because there's always going to be a one-off issue that they can't fix through that FAQ.
Chris, did you want to have anything to add?
Yeah, and it's not trying to be a defeatist or have a negative attitude, but I always kind of over prepare for what can go wrong, will go wrong, and be pleasantly surprised when everything goes smoothly. So if there's something where I need to, I feel like it's a must that I have to explain, whether it be Tableau or Alteryx, I may do a quick recording a couple days before or a week before and put it aside on my laptop, just in case there's, someone kicks the Wi-Fi, or, we have a, big feed and Wi-Fi sucks, and, some of the shenanigans that we can't even conjure up happen, so that I can continue moving. And so that aspect, what I would also do is prepare to send the class, or have an area or a Dropbox available where they could pick some of that up if there was something else happening that presented the situation where they weren't able to learn optimally. I might have something available on Dropbox as part of my preparation, just so that they can take the experience back and be able to replicate that on their own time.
Mike, do you have anything to add?
Not too much. I think Bill and Chris covered it very well, and I just want to kind of reiterate what Chris had said a few minutes ago, because I could not agree more. Make sure that you have your license, you've downloaded your sample data set. If you can get your students to do all those steps before a class goes, that kills so many of those me questions that typically come up in those first 1 or 2 sessions, and those are the questions that most drive those other 299 students nuts, because they did their work, they did their preparation, they're ready to go. And then this person who did absolutely zero preparation is expecting to just take up the entire class with needing to download the stuff that they didn't download prior to class. So I know with us, one thing that helped is we started doing a prep session before our sessions actually started, and said, okay, this is a help session to help you with making sure your license is in, that you've got your sample data set where it belongs, and all those sorts of things. So that's actually an optional session we have beforehand, and I'm almost leaning towards it becoming mandatory, so that people can make sure they have everything they need, because that's typically such a big roadblock in the beginning.
And when you mentioned that, I started creating short video clips of the stuff for my students in my classes, like how to install, how to troubleshoot install, how to check what environment you're on, that kind of thing. So for students not having digital access, we had also talked about there's a 90-day free trial for students for Alteryx. If you want to learn the Alteryx tool, Tableau Public is free. It just requires you to create a Tableau Public account. That's something I encourage all of my students to create, because Tableau Public is a way of kind of showcasing your skills and showing okay, this is where I started. And then the more you create on Tableau Public is showing your growth. So it's always good to have that Tableau Public account. And don't be afraid to create dashboards. We all start somewhere. I like to pretend my beginning dashboards don't exist, because I look back at them and I was like, oh, some color decisions were made. So, that's the kind of thing. Mike, I know you had mentioned previously about signing up with a nonprofit and volunteering. So I don't know if you wanted to mention that with training. So.
Yeah, I just recently started working with a nonprofit as part of some charitable work. And, I think all of us on here have a big passion for data and that sorts of things. I know, speaking for myself, my career field I chose wouldn't have been something I would have thought when I was younger, especially that this would be a field that I would spend my life on. But I've been lucky enough to find things within that career field that I am passionate about, like data and data transformation and those sorts of things. So what I've been able to find is there was a charity I was really interested in doing some work with, and we were talking about some ways I could contribute. And I was like, let me just ask you, what does your data look like? Could you use some help with your data? And she was like, yes. And I think you'll find that with most charities, that's very much the case, because you think about even large corporations, like some of the ones that we work for, it seems like our data is a mess. We complain about it all the time. Like, oh, I can't believe this is this and this is this. If you think your large corporation's data is a mess, try going to a small charity that has no data domain experts. Like, they basically just signed up with like maybe a Salesforce CRM team and got their data dumped in through some horrible intake form. And now that's data that's a mess. So for people like us, it can actually be a lot of fun to work with because it's messy in ways that our data just isn't. Like, so if you have that kind of opportunity to work with a charity, there are opportunities through Tableau. They have a free license they're able to offer through TechSoup. It's actually $74. In my case, I agreed to donate that to the charity so they could have that license so that I could then go use Tableau. But now I have a full license with Tableau and Tableau Prep. It actually gave me both that I can go in and use to help clean up their data and start getting it visualized. So I've just started doing that. I'm also working with Alteryx for Good. Alteryx has a similar program where they will donate a license to charities. That one, I'm having a little bit more challenge with getting it from Alteryx. I'm currently in meetings with them. I just had one yesterday, but once it all works out, they'll do basically the same thing. You'll get an Alteryx designer license and you can use that to help do some of your data. So just some ways to think outside the box as far as ways that you can get a full license out there. Obviously, the license itself will belong to the charity, but if you're their main developer who's doing all this work, then you would have that available to you to do that data.
And this working with a charity is also kind of like to help.
It's a great way to learn because, like I said, if you want to learn with some messy data.
Oh, okay. I think Mike is breaking up a little bit. Or is it me? Okay, so just working with volunteer data is also how you can help students prepare for rapidly changing technology. It's all about your data set, because this is one way that you can also encourage students to, you know, like how to help you prepare. So like your students have already gone to the class, but as we've said, you know, some things you might not get, you know, like the first time around. So how do you approach, you know, learning the tool and start in continuing on with your learning journey? So start with a data set that interests you. You know, you could volunteer like Mike has done with a nonprofit. You could also, Alteryx has community challenges. Tableau has Workout Wednesday, Makeover Mondays. So that's, you know, I want to pose that question to you all too, is how do you help prepare students for that rapidly changing technical landscape? Chris, I'm going to start with you first.
What I try to do is try to get them to understand what is free to them, because when I was learning these tools, my biggest fear was trying to find the right data set. And as I work professionally, when I have examples that I want to show people, I am very mindful of client NDAs and client data. I can't show that. So what do I need to do? I need to find repositories and areas where I can use free data confidently and then interchange the free data with the, you know, customer data I had been using, and then go ahead and do that. So when I teach, you know, a lot of college students, especially the last several college classes I've taught, people who are just graduating or wanted to graduate, say, I don't know how to explain or articulate how I know something because I don't have the experience. So what I try to tell them is that you have a free Alteryx license, right? And you have a Tableau public license, right? And I'm not, yeah. So what I try to do is say, use your free data to create a use case and then push that out to a visualization tool like Tableau Public and create a portfolio for yourself. Because, when I look for things and look for people and look for, people who I'd like to hire on my team or what have you, I want problem solvers. I can teach people tools. You can't teach an instinctive process that people just sort of, understand and want to learn, right? So that's one of the things that I want them to get that practice of doing now, so that they can use sample data to literally create their visual portfolio. Have your Tableau public profile be an audition for jobs, because I know recruiters do look through there. And so when I mention that to them, I mention that to them in every class I try to teach, so that they're not forlorn because I'm dealing with, so I don't have 20 years of experience and they don't apply to something. It's like, stop that. You need to, go ahead and build your brand and do it that way.
Mike, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, just to kind of piggyback off that, I know I had a team member in the past who reached out to me, and she was frustrated because she was trying to apply for jobs in new territory. And, the classic conundrum of applying for a job. You want to get into a new field, but everybody wants experience. And how can I get experience if nobody will give me the opportunity? And I think what Chris just mentioned is such a key answer to that question. You need to find your way to get that experience and then showcase it when you get that opportunity. So whether it is taking those sample data sets, or I know Alteryx has their Alteryx Challenge series that you can go out there and answer some questions, which have some really interesting. And if you're into data and trying to problem solve, they are fun. I've had a lot of those, and I just had a blast solving. And you'll find that people's answers are all over the place. There's no one answer to most of those solutions out there. So showing how you did it, how you approached it, and being able to showcase that to someone is exactly how you can get that experience that you need in dealing with those kinds of data, and showing that experience without actually having the job yet, and showing that you're more than capable of handling it.
Bill?
Yeah. I would say I had somebody reach out recently about the Tableau certification. I was like, yeah, Tableau certification is great, but build a public, Tableau profile. Start building stuff. Let them see what you're doing. That's going to show more value than chasing a certification. Certifications are nice, and they show your competency with taking a test, but they don't show what you can do. So I highly value Chris' comments there, that leaders and recruiters, they do look for what you can do on those dashboards out there. Another thing is just learning the skills that are transferable. You're learning how to solve problems, like Chris said. It's not the tools, it's the problem solving that's behind it. I didn't start learning until I built, kind of that growth mindset, and I started to let myself be wrong and be okay with being wrong, and grow from, those learning lessons. And just like I told the class recently that I had, I relish in my failures, because my failures help me grow. The only failure is really not learning from your failures, not, having failures. Having failures means you learn, but not having failures, and being, stuck in your mindset that you're never going to grow from those failures is the real failure.
And this also piggybacks into one of our next questions, which is, what's your strategy for keeping students engaged and curious about tech topics? And I think we've kind of covered some of this, but one method I use is pick an out there left field use case. There is a Lego model, 3D model Tableau dashboard out there in Tableau Public. Something that people wouldn't think normally you could do with the tool that you're using. Or with Alteryx, there's bingo cards. I used Alteryx to do bingo cards for my wedding reception. And that's something you can do. It's a really cool use case that you wouldn't have thought you could use this tool for. So I'm also going to reach out. Go ahead, Bill. Do you have a method for keeping students interested and engaged? A strategy?
Yeah. In the classroom, of course, you want to build that rapport, with either your fellow teachers. I know me and McDowell, we have a good rapport because we constantly, joke at each other and rib at each other. And I know if I feel that energy is going down, I'll throw a jib at McDowell and just make fun of him, and I know he's gonna pick it up and he's going to take it positively, and he's gonna give it back to me as well, and that's gonna make it more interesting for the class because now we have this fake fighting that's going on that's not really fighting. But you have to find that within the class as well. So you have to find those people that you can joke with, that are going to be cool with it. Even if you don't have somebody that's a trainer, you can find the students that they're kind of cool with, like joking with, and they appreciate that and they anticipate that, because sometimes you'll find those students that are looking for you to call on them to like joke with them because they want that energy in the classroom, and that interaction actually makes it more engaging for the entire classroom. So it's not just I am here to learn and I got to learn this thing, but I'm here to learn, I'm here to have fun, and I'm going to have a good time just joking with Bill, joking with Dawn, joking with McDowell and Chris.
But I wouldn't suggest making fun of anybody in your class first off without no.
No, you definitely have to gauge that 100%.
No, you have to gauge your audience. I just make fun of myself, so that's how I, cover that. I just, you got to be willing to, go ahead, Mike. Anything to add?
Yeah, Bill and I's classes, I've had somebody told me once it was like a little bit of an Abbott and Costello routine that we had going on, just kind of going the way we go back and forth in class sometimes. But it is great because in our classes, we really encourage people to keep their Zoom cameras on so you can see if they're engaged or not. Like it's in Zoom especially, that's one of the biggest challenges, right? Like because you just know at some points you're losing people. You might see like cameras start shutting off, or you just see people kind of with a blank stare. You can see they're multitasking. So I love when we can keep the cameras on and see how engaged they are. And you do see that engagement go up when you do keep it a little lighter, a little bit more entertaining. And you can see some smiles when you crack a joke and that sort of thing. So that definitely does help a lot with engagement.
Chris?
Oh, let me unmute first. Yeah, I don't have too much more to add. You guys covered it pretty bluntly. It's just, I just concur. I mean, yeah. Otherwise, I'm just talking fluff now and I don't want to do that.
Chris, I want to bring up one point. I know you've had more in-person classes than we have. So how do you keep up engagement in person?
Energy. My energy, even when I'm tired, I have energy for days. When I come out of these classes, usually for like an hour or so, I'm still kind of like, and then it's like literally the 61st minute, I'll be like, okay. And so I think if I show, it's just a strategy of mine. I'm not saying it's complete, but it's just one of those things where if I can show them that they should be excited about something, it's contagious. If I show them that they should care because I care and this is why I care, I just try to link it to real experiences. Sometimes, especially when you're teaching college students, they don't want to hear it unless there's a direct relationship to getting a job. And it's just kind of, sometimes they've been literally, flooded their brains with 15 years of things that they think they may not use because it's in a classroom setting. Well, that's not the case now. You are really about to leave the playground, so to speak. You're about to get into the actual world of things happening for real. Like there is no training ground, so to speak, when you're dealing with this. So when you learn, if I'm teaching you something, there's a reason why I'm teaching it to you. And I articulate things to ensure that they actually understand why. And this is why. And this is why. And that's why. So I try to make sure that I have the energy and tell them, if you hear nothing else I say, I want you to take X, Y, and Z home and try it out for yourself. And force them to focus with a purpose. That's probably the only thing I can probably underscore a little bit more.
I would say my energy depends on how much coffee I've had and part of what time of day it is. Is it early morning and then I'm talking really fast? and there's too much coffee, and then later on in the day where I need coffee. So that's my energy levels right there. What do you think, Mike? Same coffee, not coffee teaching.
Absolutely, and I shared with Bill I had a Bloody Mary this morning, and that helped a lot too. So it all depends on what you're looking for when you're getting your energy. So.
Mike is off today. He's off today. Just to clarify, he's not teaching a class. He is off. He was nice enough to be on this podcast from the beach. So
that's right.
Our last question is, how do you measure success? So how do you measure if you've successfully taught a class? This is always the hard question to ask, because as a teacher, you will feel like you haven't you didn't reach everybody. You might feel like, where's Waldo? Sometimes at a class, like, hello, is anybody listening? So I'm gonna ask Mike, if you wanna, how do you measure you've taught a class successfully?
Yeah, I know. It's like as a data person, I tend to love looking for any metrics I can find to tell me that. So we have some at our company we can look at as far as like, are people using tools? Are they registering new things? Like, and those sorts of things. So really on the kind of data nerd side, I do looking to see if like, are they just coming to class to check a box, or are they coming to class and actually developing stuff? And sometimes you can see that when people reach back out to you too and be like, hey, I started building this really cool workflow, but I'm kind of stuck in this place. So when you have folks reaching out to you with those sorts of solutions, that can be some indication for it as well. I think trying to measure it by metrics is a challenge, though. I can tell you I've worked with so many trainers, and it's hard to find those metrics that are going to tell you if you're being successful. So sometimes it's almost better to look at the individual level and try to get some concept of how people are absorbing it on an individual level. But if you can find good metrics tied to whether people are actually using what they learned, I find that's really rewarding as well.
Chris?
Success is an interesting term here, because what I want to make sure that, what I set out to do for a class, and it's not just about getting through to the end of the class. It's about, if you get to the end of the class and you have a whole blue screen of death set of looks in your audience, you've not done your job. It's one of those where, yeah, I can get through the class, but no one will be with me. I want to make sure that there's interaction. I want to make sure that, before I move over to a module, there's acceptance on, hey, are we good here? Do I need to revisit anything? I'm very interactive with my audience about that. If there's chatter after the class about what happened, like, hey, I thought it was cool when you did X, Y, Z, and it's not just with me, if it's with the others, then I know I've gotten to the point where they're excited about what they've learned. It wasn't a waste of their time, and that I was able to articulate properly. Success is not just about the material I'm teaching them. It's about reaching them with the material that I'm talking about. And if I can gather their eye contact, I'll walk around the class, I'll look at people. I have slides, but I don't lean on them. I can give them a slide deck. I can give them a PDF of the slide deck. I want them to understand where I'm coming from and have that physical connection if I'm in front of them. And if I look at that and people are saying, this is great, I really got a lot from this, that's wonderful. It's hard because I want people to come out of this class knowing that they can have confidence in doing something that when I'm not there. And sometimes you won't understand that initially. You may get something later saying, hey, I was able to do this because of your class. Thank you very much. I look for those type of things and comments, because then I've reached that person.
Bill, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I would say the biggest indicator of success is people referring you. People saying, hey, Mike took your class and he referred me to you and you did a great job. That is the biggest success that I've had. And, people reaching out and saying, I appreciate your approach. I appreciate your teaching style. that is how you measure success. And I've had the honor and the privilege of helping build, students, previous students into leaders and helping them grow, their presenting skills, as well as you, Dawn, have urged us into training as well. We've taken that on and helped people kind of build their careers. And we've had people, go into a non-data role, into a data roles, by taking these classes and taking the learning from you and as well as us. So that to me is like the biggest measure of success, when a student can become a leader in data and building not only a department and an area and within their company, but maybe even a whole, country within, their community, that never used data before. So I think that is a huge indicator of success, and bringing that learning and education to maybe under served areas, as well as people that didn't have that education before, and literally changing their careers and having them tell you, hey, you've changed my life by teaching me these skills.
It always surprises me when I hear feedback of like, oh, I really enjoyed your class. Because sometimes when you're teaching, you get the crickets and you don't realize your impact until after the session. It's always kind of, I know for myself, I always think that I could be doing better. I'll take notes, I'll look at reviews and say like, what can I do better? Because I know I'm not perfect. I know everybody's not perfect, but I'm going to try to do my best. So I'm always happily surprised when I get a little note. It's like, oh, yay, I helped somebody. So with that, I know we're at 2-ish minutes into the podcast. I didn't know if anybody out there had questions for us in the community. I did see some comments flow through from LinkedIn. Some great points out there. Will Perkins said, we all have failures, and failure to be self-aware can hold you back from real growth. So that was a really cool topic that we brought up in the session. Raphael said, building Tableau Public profiles also immerses you in the data community. So you're growing a network of data-minded folks that you can reach out to with questions. Most of the time, they'll respond back with any help. And I have noticed that about the Tableau ambassadors and Alteryx Aces. You can network. Everybody's curious about data. Some of us might be able to stretch a little thin if we haven't reached back out. But we do want to help and encourage to help. So and then Will said, when trainees can hear energy, passion, and direction, that makes an enormous difference. So training is rewarding. I strongly encourage it. That's why I've dragged Bill and Mike and Chris into some teaching events with me. Does anybody else on the call, do you want to make any closing comments, Bill, Mike, or Chris?
I mean, I would say with that, you dragging us into teaching, Dawn has an amazing ability to network with people, and she always has, and dragging people in that can make wonderful presentations and wonderful training events and everything like that, and building leaders. So I appreciate that as well. And she doesn't like it when I compliment her, but I always compliment people.
Well, Bill has patience I wish I had. So that's how I was like, Bill, I knew you'd be a good teacher. You're more patient than me. So, that's why I pushed you into it. Mike, do you have any closing?
Yeah, just that I know that I can honestly say I've learned so much by teaching, probably more than I did when I was talking about, or when I first started developing and making mistakes and those sorts of things. With teaching, you just get, every student has the opportunity to give you with a use case you never thought of. So as you start teaching hundreds and thousands of students over time, you just hear things that you have never even considered in your life as a potential use case for Alteryx, maybe a way of doing things. Same with Tableau. Like, it just has taught me so many different ways of thinking through problems and thinking through potential solutions and uses for the tools than I ever imagined possible. So if anyone out there is considering teaching and hasn't quite jumped in, as I said, I was very reluctant getting into it myself. It's been so rewarding on so many levels, but at the most basic level, it's taught me things I would have never learned otherwise.
Chris?
Yeah, I'm gonna give you another compliment too, Tom. So you're just gonna have to take this one. Listening to you teach, even teaching with you at Tableau Conference, taught me a lot about my style. And watching others teach, I learn every day. I learn every other minute of the days. Um, that's how you get stronger and more diverse because you find multiple ways of being able to reach people. And that's really important. I will always, be a sponge. I think you're one of the best teachers I've ever worked with and dealt with. I say that in my 30 years of analytics experience. It's an honor to teach with you. And then, the three of us here, the four of us here, we all have that wonderful skill, and you're all special in being able to teach and reach people, regardless of the topic. So if anybody who's going to be able to, who would like to get into this and like to teach, it's not just about patience, it's also about preparation and making sure that you can handle situations. So the preparation will prepare you for the stress that comes with the random questions. And so if you prepare beforehand, you know, take it easy, take some breaths, carry on, and nothing will fluster you and you're going to be all right. So this teaching is a wonderful experience. It should be embraced with all sorts of love and care. So,
and there will be soft skills that you pick up. So when you're teaching it the first time and someone asks a left field question, you'll learn how to guide users just naturally with experience. So just don't be afraid. We were all there once. You're going to be a better teacher the more you do it. We did get one question as a teacher or mentor. What warm fuzzies or use cases have you had when you see students flourish and emerge in their respective communities? I'll let, just interest of time, I'll let Bill, Mike, Chris, you can answer this question.
Yeah, I mean, when they go on to be teachers, they go on to build great work sets that do amazing things that are far beyond anything you could have ever done, and you're like just wowed by them. I have use cases where people are building up, entire servers and everything that I could never do, and I'm like, this is really advanced. If you're going to ask me about this, I have no idea, but the steps that we took in the beginning got you there, so I'm proud of that.
Yeah, 100%. We, as Bill mentioned earlier, we have the opportunity to interact with our students a lot on an ongoing basis. We try to establish kind of a community of practice, so we do get to see kind of how they're doing afterwards, and seeing what they do with their solutions and in their own career paths is just amazing. And it's definitely the most rewarding part of the job. There's no greater compliment than seeing someone who you've taught a new skill to use that skill to further their own career or make a positive impact in some way. So 100% want to second that.
Chris?
well, and also being able to teach somebody else. And, we are in a world of social media where things go on like electricity on the wire. At the end of the day, grassroots of word of mouth, especially on a college campus, or even within a professional environment, if you've been teaching a course, corporate course, if you've reached somebody, that person's going to talk to somebody else, and that person's going to want to be a part of what they were a part of. So that's something that's really kind of like you were talking about, tying back to the success. That's also a really good sign of a successful effort all the way around.
Awesome. Well, thank you everybody for listening. Appreciate the commentary. Hopefully you found this session enjoyable. I always love talking to other teachers too, just because you all inspire me with the next course that I'm going to teach. You know what I mean? The methods myself. So thank you everybody, and I hope you have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.